On episode 123 of Veteran on the Move, I'm talking with Lee Woodruff, the co-author of the New York Times best-selling book, In an Instant, A Family's Journey of Love and Healing, which chronicles her family's journey to recovery following her husband's, journalist Bob Woodruff, roadside bomb injury in Iraq.
Welcome to Veteran on the Move. If you're a veteran in transition, an entrepreneur wannabe, or someone still stuck in that job trying to escape, this podcast is dedicated to your success. And now, your host, Joe Crane.
I've been a USAA member for over 26 years. USAA has been alongside my family for my entire military career, including my transition out of the military. In addition to providing great insurance and banking products, USAA also provides a wide range of tools and advice to make your transition from the military a financial success. To learn more, go to veteranonthemove.com/leaving the military. Lee Woodruff garnered critical acclaim for the compelling and humorous chronicle of her family's journey to recovery following her husband's, journalist Bob Woodruff, roadside bomb injury in Iraq. Appearing on national television and as keynote speakers since the February 2007 publication of their book, the couple has helped put a face on the serious issue of traumatic brain injury among returning Iraq war veterans, as well as the millions of Americans who live with this often invisible but life-changing affliction. All right, Lee Woodruff and Dr. Matla, thanks for being here. Welcome to Veteran on the Move. Before we get to talk about business and entrepreneurship and what you're doing with your nonprofit, take us back a little bit, give us a little bit of your background, Lee, and walk us through what happened to Bob over in Iraq.
Well, my husband, Bob, was the ABC News anchor after Peter Jennings in 2006, and he had been part of the team that was originally embedded during the invasion in 2003. He'd been covering wars for about 10 years, so he was certainly no stranger to being, in areas of conflict and the military. But what happened to Bob when he was reporting in January 2006 is something that happens to our troops every day. And his convoy was hit by a roadside bomb, and he was reporting half out of the tank. So he received a traumatic brain injury. 125 millimeter shell exploded just about 25 feet away from him. There's no reason in the world that he should be alive right now, let alone back reporting and remembering to take out the garbage. But he is. And we felt that his recovery was really so miraculous, and so the attention we got so visible, so not something that we wanted or expected necessarily, that we needed to do something with that. So we started the Bob Woodruff Foundation, which is now 10 years old. And the goal was to take the notoriety that we had and the ability that we had traveling around the country, speaking and talking and meeting vets, to figure out who was doing really good work, what the issues were, and raise money and turn it back on those groups that were really, tackling some of the issues. And for Dr. Matla and I, especially this week, while there's a vote up in Congress, one of the issues that I'm really connected to as a spouse and a former caregiver is making sure that our families have everything they need to succeed and thrive. Because while you're focused on entrepreneurism on your podcast, that veteran's never going to be able to go out and start a business and bring to that everything that they need to bear if they don't have the backside taken care of. And for that, it means health, happiness, and family. And right now, there's an issue in Congress, which I'm going to turn to Dr. Matla to explain, that really fires up my tail feathers, Joe, because it's unfair. And this is not how America treats its vets.
Yeah, now that's well said. Unfortunately, we have 3,000 or so veterans who've been injured in Afghanistan, in Iraq, who have reproductive injuries, spinal injuries, brain injuries. And the only way for these individuals to have a family is through IVF care or in vitro fertilization. And most unfortunately, the Veterans Administration doesn't cover such care. Ironically, if these individuals stayed on active duty, they would in fact have IVF care. But what tends to happen is a young man goes off to war, he's injured, he rehabilitates over months or years, he marries, he goes to his VA for care, for IVF, the only way he can have a child, and they say, I'm sorry. And this dates back to 1992 when Congress prohibited the VA from providing such care. Now, the VA today, Joe, wants to provide the care, but they're prohibited from Congress. So our goal is to help educate our legislators that IVF today is a safe standard of care where typically we transfer back one embryo to a woman and produce a safe, normal, low-risk pregnancy. In the interim, what's happened is many of these veterans are starting to get older, and they're starting to age out of their optimal reproductive years, both men and women. So a number of us got together, physicians who were concerned about this, nonprofits like the Bob Woodruff Foundation, and pharmaceutical companies like Ferring Pharmaceutical, and said, what can we do? How can we get these people care now before our government acts, or finally, hopefully, our government will act? So we put together a program where medical practices deeply discount care. Ferring Pharmaceuticals donates medication to make this possible and a help in a Heart for Heroes program. And together, we are caring for these veterans, but it's only temporary. We need a permanent fix for this, and that's where a legislative solution comes in.
Yes, it sounds like one of those, you said what dates back to 1992, one of those almost ancient rules that was put in place because these type of services or medical procedures were somewhat experimental, and they didn't want the VA getting involved in that kind of a thing. But it's obviously come a long ways. I mean, probably everybody knows. I have a sister-in-law that has done in vitro, so almost everybody knows somebody at this point. We're talking 2016 now.
No, I think you're exactly right. I mean, back in 92, in vitro care was new, poorly understood. 25 years later, there are millions of babies born around the world, and we want to bring this care to our veterans as well. And unfortunately, as conflict in the world continues, and women now enter more combat roles, there's going to be more need to make our veterans whole medically when they come home.
Now, Lee, you and your husband started the Bob Woodruff Foundation after his injuries, and how was it that you took the Bob Woodruff Foundation and got into the in vitro game and get involved in legislation with Congress and everything? I mean, that's taking it from running a nonprofit to now you're beating the drums up on Capitol Hill. How is it you have arrived at that?
Well, that's a great question because we're not an advocacy group. We've never done anything as a foundation. We stay away from the Hill, quite frankly. So I'm here as an individual today, as a citizen, and someone who's become very familiar with military families and the issues and the pain of often the caregiver, who's many times a female. The issue of intimacy after injury and fertility was one that I've become aware of in talking to spouses who will let their hair down to me because they know that I've traveled along the same route. I mean, Bob was older when he was injured. Our family was complete. His recovery is miraculous. And so there are many times I feel a sense of survivor's guilt because so many of these couples have ended up in a place that Bob and I are not at. We have resources through his company. We had every rehabilitative tool available to Bob. We had the ability to have families staying 24/7 around him in the hospital, which many of the families do not. So I became aware of some of the pain and heartbreak of these families and their inability to conceive children because, these aren't families making $1 million a year. Our military families are on a very limited income. And so to be able to reach for some of these treatments, it's like, it's something that they're going to have to finance on a credit card and think about you can't put a value on a child for these families. So I wanted us to talk about something that most of America wasn't aware of. And a lot of our veterans were having a hard time talking about. And we were able, through this convening, to get some simple changes made. For example, one of the questions that was never asked in a VA checkup with couples after injury was, how's your marriage? How's your relationship? How are things in the bedroom? And that's not something that a couple is going to just offer to their doctor unless their doctor asks. So the result of the convening was simple questions like that being added to the VA roster so that you could come to topics like, well, we'd love to have a child, but we can't because, Jim is paralyzed. And so Dr. Motlin and I had met years ago. Ironically, my 16-year-old twins were, I was laughing with him, were conceived somewhere in his offices at Shady Grove Fertility. And I'm passionate about this. Changed my life to be able to have those two girls after having a hysterectomy. And certainly they were a huge part of Bob's healing and his ability to come back, and our veterans deserve that as well. So one last thing about what we choose to get involved in and how it moves. In 10 years, it's been a gift and a godsend to be a granting organization, because at the end of the day, these are the longest wars that we've ever had in this nation's history, and the needs have morphed. So whereas initially 10 years ago, the needs were things like ramps for wheelchairs or backpacks for troops that were deployed, we've had a giant drawdown, and the issues are very different now. There are things like this infertility issue with IVF. It's things like mental health and post-traumatic stress, suicide prevention, and reemployment, which is where you come in with your podcast, which is so nice. So issues change, time moves it on, and because we are a granting organization and can turn the spigot of dollars on the issue really quickly and be nimble, this is the issue right now that needs all of our attention, not just Dr. Motla's and mine, but it needs everybody to call their congressperson and their representatives and say, pass this bill, make this fair for our injured vets.
Well, Lee, thanks to you and Dr. Motla for both furthering this cause, and what a great cause. It's one of those things. You're right. It's one of those things that doesn't get talked about very often, and zeroing in on it and identifying this as a problem that could be easily fixed. Good on you guys for doing what you're doing. I wanted to ask you a little bit more of a personal question, Lee. Here at Veteran on the Move, we're all about helping veterans transition to the world of entrepreneurship, and there are many veterans that start nonprofits like you and your husband Bob have done, and you guys are running a very successful nonprofit. What's that like to start a nonprofit like you have done and see it grow over a 10-year time frame, and to see all the people and individuals that you've managed to help along the way?
I think that's what keeps us going, because it's a really big deal to start a nonprofit. And I would urge so many people out there to think twice before you do. It's an enormous undertaking, and it's been a real privilege. And we are the most generous nation in the world. But it's you're responsible for people. And I think about that every single day. So be ready to take on that responsibility. But there is no wrong deed, and it's. I guess if I stop to think about the veterans we've touched, it seems impossible. So it's hard. It's a hard thing to imagine. But Bob always says, if one person were helped by his injury, then that would be worth it.
Absolutely, and that brings up a good point, because I know a lot of my fellow veterans themselves. They have phenomenal stories, and they have these injuries. Similar to Bob, and in many cases much worse, that they've managed to overcome. But they don't have that background that you and Bob have, and they don't have that voice. They don't have that ability to get their story out there. So doing what you guys are doing, is a phenomenal deed yourself to shed light and to be a voice for those that don't have their own voice.
Well, it certainly seemed like it was a mandate. We got a lot of attention, and it wasn't deserved. I don't know that we've given you sort of a place where viewers can go when they're for more information. Because
absolutely.
As you said, there's so much out there. It's hard to access information. And before I turn that over to Dr. Motla, one of the things that we're working on in the foundation and with others in the space is to try to create one place ultimately where veterans can go for information, and through that sort of portal, whatever that looks like, to be able to find all these things. So the dream would be one day you go to one general clearinghouse, and you then through that access information about employment or fertility or all of that. But it is a space that's not well organized, that's for sure. And so you need to be able to have websites and information at your fingertips.
Okay, well, how do we find out more about the Bob Woodruff Foundation and what you guys are doing with In Vitro?
Well, you can go to bobwoodrufffoundation.org, and we, at the moment in time, our work with In Vitro and trying to work on this bill is through the good graces of people like Ferring Pharmaceuticals with Heart for Heroes, and then Dr. Motla, who's really assembled the network of 103 fertility clinics around the country to give highly discounted services. But as he said before, this is just a Band-Aid. We really need this to work. But maybe you can provide the websites that...
Yeah, there are two other websites, Joe, that probably would be helpful. Before that, I would have your veterans contact their doctors as sort of first choice. Secondly would be the Heart for Heroes website. Third would be a website called resolve.org, patient advocacy. And then our medical society website gives direction and guidance as well, and that's the American Society for Reproductive Medicine.
Okay, so you're saying that if there's a veteran family out there that's having fertility issues, that they should talk to their own doctor first, and then once they find out what it's going to cost, or if they run into some roadblocks, then they should try to look you guys up for further help.
Yeah, I'm Joe. I'm one of, I believe in gathering all the information you can, and I'd start both. I'd talk to the doctor, I'd go to the website and learn what I could through there, and go to the Heart for Heroes website as well. And with that effort, I am very confident the veteran out there will get into a care program that we want to provide for them desperately. But as Lee said, it's temporary. We need a permanent fix through our Congress.
And right now, without any legislation being passed, you do have military families that are getting fertility help at a heavy discount, and then a lot of the drugs associated with it are being donated for free. That's where we're at right now as a temporary fix?
Correct. Correct.
Well,
all the drugs are
outstanding.
being donated for free, and we're trying to discount services as much as we can. But again, it's temporary. We need to get a permanent fix.
All right, Lee, I'd like to ask you another question about the nonprofit industry. There are a lot of veterans out there that when they get out, they want to start a nonprofit. If you could talk to that veteran that's wanting to get out and get behind their nonprofit idea, what kind of advice would you give them? I know you said earlier that it's not easy, but it's very rewarding.
Yes, and I mean, honestly, my honest answer to you is there are more than 46,000 organizations that claim to help veterans. So there are many of us in the space who feel like the last thing we need is one more nonprofit right now, because what we need to do as people care less, sadly, about the issue, and we go into year 14 of war, and Americans are caring less, everybody's scrabbling for the same resources. So everybody's going after the same funders. And what I actually would counsel somebody, unless they're willing to go through the very rigorous annual exercise of doing the taxes, taking care of employees, providing health insurance. I mean, opening a 501c3 sounds very simple. It's very complicated. Study what it means to do so before you do it, because there are all kinds of rules and regulations. People can get into big trouble. You have to keep your nose clean. You have to pay bookkeepers. You have to pay lawyers. So really research what that means to start a foundation. But I always say, look around and see, is there somebody doing what you want to do? Can you throw in with them? Can you combine resources? Is there an existing organization in your town that's already doing equine therapy, for example? And is there a way you can work together? Because I actually believe, and this probably isn't what you want to hear, but the last thing the world needs right now in this space is another nonprofit. It needs a lot bit more people to help and to do some good and roll up their sleeves, but it doesn't necessarily need another group. We need to sort of combine lanes and all work together.
I agree with you completely. I mean, having stood up a nonprofit myself, it's very cumbersome, and the IRS is watching them like a hawk, and you got to do everything right. And there's a lot.
You do, and there are lots of nights I go to sleep. Yeah, and I think, oh my gosh, we have 7 employees, and I'm responsible for all of them. And if I can't bring in $2 million this year, no joke. If I can't bring that money in, then they're going to be unemployed. I mean, that's a big, big weight. And you've got to ask yourself, is that something you want to take on? Had I known that it would involve all of this, I just was a dumb idiot, so happy that my husband was alive. But I honestly would have thought twice as a working mother with 4 kids. It's a lot. And I'm just throwing that out there to your listeners as a very honest answer, unvarnished.
Absolutely. I gotta take a quick break to make room for our sponsor. In my 26 years as a USAA member, we logged 9 PCS moves and 4 overseas deployments, with 2 of those being combat tours in Iraq. Not to mention all of the exercises and training debts over the years, all in the interest of combat readiness. Maintaining readiness is an absolute must. You've probably heard readiness thousands of times during your military training. When you're planning to leave the military, readiness may be the key to a successful transition in your financial security. As an organization created by military members for military members, USAA is committed to making your transition from the military a financial success. To learn more, visit USAA's separations tools and advice at veteranonthemove.com/leaving the military. All right, we're back, and we were talking about the difficulty and the great responsibility in standing up a nonprofit. And Lee, you got some great advice. And like I said, I've started my own nonprofit, and I've not gotten very far with it, just because it is not an easy thing to do. And you gave some great advice for those of us out there that are looking to start a nonprofit. Like you said, the last thing we need right now is another veteran nonprofit, because there's so many out there that I think you said it was 46,000.
More than 40, over 46,000.
That's incredible. Yeah. And every day you see a lot of them are under fire. Some of them for intentionally doing things wrong. Some of them for just not, going the extra effort to do things right, which is, it's easy to do. So, as we get close to wrapping this up, I know you guys are on a whirlwind tour here. What are some of the final things that you'd like to pass along to the veteran community out there for what the Bob Woodruff Foundation's doing?
Well, our goal is to look at the landscape and see where the needs are, and we're not afraid to tackle those issues that might, be ones that are hard to talk about, and infertility, and the sort of the shame and stigma around that, or lack of intimacy. Those are hard topics. And I sort of feel like it was this, like Dr. Matla and all of the fertility work and Ferring Pharmaceutical and those willing to give medications coming together with our goals and interest in this area is a little bit like somebody's chocolate got in my peanut butter, and we ended up being a great dessert. And we hope that together, by taking the industry and their amazing generosity in offering discounted services and free medication, the Heart for Heroes program, along with our ability to locate veterans and maybe find veterans who might not be aware of this program and then help them get the access, I think we can go a very long way toward helping our vets. But we need the government to act, and we need them to equalize what our active duty service members currently get and provide that to those who have fought for their country, been injured on the battlefield for us, and now just want to start a family like the rest of us take for granted.
Okay, that's great. And Leah, I hope you don't mind if I ask this last question. Being a Marine, I'm very akin to what's going on in the news, and I distinctly remember when the news of Bob being blown up in the IED in Iraq came out. And there's probably a lot of people that may have just gone right past him, but I distinctly remember when that happened. And it's truly an honor to be here talking on the phone with you and hearing what you guys and the Bob Woodruff Foundation are doing. Do you mind if I ask, how's Bob doing these days? I haven't been following his story for quite some time now. How are things going?
I love when people ask that question. He's fantastic. He's the Asia correspondent for ABC News, so he's been shuttling back and forth from Beijing all year. His little 16-year-old daughters, who coincidentally were born by in vitro fertilization, are just getting on an airplane to go see him right now in Beijing. And we're a really, really blessed family. And thank you for asking, Joe. And thank you also for your service. Hoorah.
Absolutely. Hoorah. Well, thanks, Lee and Dr. Matla. I appreciate you all being here and sharing your story and really your veteran entrepreneurship story with the veteran community and what you guys are doing. And we appreciate all the good work and being an advocate for this veteran issue.
Well, one last comment is that we always say in the work that we do in reemployment, there is no better person to employ than a veteran, because they understand all the issues. They're calm under crisis. They are, entrepreneurs every day in terms of being able to take a hard situation and figure out what to do next. They make the best people to work as an entrepreneur or in anyone's corporation. So thanks for what you're doing.
Outstanding, Lee. I couldn't have said it better myself. All right, Lee and Dr. Matla, I appreciate it. And that's a wrap for us. So we are Oscar Mike. Be sure to check out Thrive15.com, the world's premier online education platform that helps entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs learn how to start or grow a successful business. Start your free 30-day membership by going to Thrive15.com and use the promo code VETERAN. Thank you for listening to Veteran on the Move, your pathfinder to freedom. If you like the show, leave us a review on iTunes. Reviews are always greatly appreciated. So until next time, this veteran is Oscar Mike.